Hi, my name is Maximiliano Gonzalez and I'm here for present the first topic of this video today is biology and its fields of action. This comprehensive science studies life from different standpoints, from the structure of the atoms and the molecules to the biology of the evolutionary development of population to other areas of study and branches of biology that have been incorporated over time. The branches derived from biology are varied such as anatomy, anthropology, botany, embryology, biomedicine, biochemistry, cytology, genetic, histology, immunology, virology, and zoology. And we have another twist astrology, but it's not yet it's considered like another derivative from the biology. But one day astronomy will be apart because it's not so far that the humans can explore the space more than he do the last 10 or includes 20 years of we have. Biology has allowed us to know the composition of the materials that pass the genetic information from one to another in that's called genetic. This evolution started the prevalence of archaea, then the bacteria, and later the eukarya, though we can avoid more specific in the next topics. Some persistent questions that every human asks are how, why, and why are we on this planet, which we call Earth. The answers over the history of humanity have been varied, and we still do not have one that leaves us satisfied. As knowledge, the progress and success in established principles and facts that could be demonstrate other possible explanations from the origin of life. We formulate some consider that electrical activity in the atmosphere originate life. Others suggest that the creation life occurs in the volcanoes, that some more say that origin of life lies in the bottom of the ocean, and others that the living being arrived transported by meteorites on comets. The truth until now is that everything that has previously happened gives rise to a system based on the deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid, capable of storing information to create various molecules and edit their modifications.
Characteristics of living beings. The characteristics that unify living beings can be summarized in 8 points. One of them is organization. In living beings, the components are organized complexly. Genetic code. All living beings share an essential characteristic, their genetic code. Response to stimuli. Perception and response to stimuli that come from external and internal environment. Homeostasis. While everything in the universe tends to chaos, life strives to maintain its balance even if it has to spend energy to achieve this. Metabolism. Obtaining and using energy. Growth. All living beings, to a greater or lesser extent, increase their volume. Reproduction. To perpetuate their species, individuals must reproduce themselves. This reproduction can be asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, and parasexual reproduction. Adaptation, ability, and evolution. The world is changing. Every one of the species settled on this planet is forced to adapt and evolve in order to survive. This can be summarized in the phrase adapt or die. Eukaryotic cells. The most notable difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells is the presence of nucleus, the membranous compartment in which the genetic material is confined. There are 2 types of eukaryotic cells, the animal and the vegetable. The animal cell components are the plasma membrane, the nucleus, the rook endoplasmic reticulum, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, the lysosomes, the peroxisomes, the mitochondria, the cytoskeleton, the centrosome, the centrioles, the ribosomes, and the cytoplasmic inclusions. The plant cell components are similar to the animal cell components because both of them are eukaryotic cells. Plant cell components are the cell wall, the central vacuole, the plastids that include the chloroplast, the leucoplast, chromoplast, amyloplast, elioplast, glaxiosome, and plasmadesma.
Hi, my name is Diana, and I'm going to talk about the history of the microscope, the cell, and the cell theory. So, the first topic is the history of the microscope, and well, the first microscope was the magnifying lens, which is now known as the composite microscope, and the oldest magnifying lens was invented in the Syrian Empire in 750 BC. The compound microscope was most likely invented by Zacharias Janssen, Galileo Galilei, or Cornelius Drebbel. The first person to use the microscope for scientific purposes was Robert Hooke in 1665, and the microscope he used had a magnification of 50 times. Later, Anton van Leeuwenhoek's new technique allowed him to reach a magnification of 200 times. In the 19th century, the microscope was perfected and it became really useful, especially in the medical field. Now for the cells. First of all organisms are composed of cells. And what are cells? Cells are complex thermodynamic structures that use energy to maintain the conditions that make possible their existence. The form that the cells acquire depends on the organization of their cytoskeleton and on the functions that they fulfill. All cells have three fundamental characteristics, which are first, the plasma membrane, which defines the boundary between the cell and its environment. The second characteristic is the cytoplasm, which is contained within the limit imposed by the plasma membrane. And lastly, the third fundamental characteristic is the genetic material, which is the DNA that the cells have, and it contains all the metabolic machinery to fulfill their physiological functions. And finally, the cell theory. The three authors of the cell theory are Schwann, Schleiden, and Virchow. The first postulate of the cell theory is that all living beings are made up of cells. The second one says that every cell comes from a pre-existing one, which contradicts the spontaneous generation theory. The next one says that the cell is the physiological unit of life. All vital functions take place within the cells, and only one is enough to generate life. The fourth one is that the cell contains DNA for the control of its development, growth, reproduction, and to transmit that into the next generation. Now, we can add a fifth postulate, which is that the disease begins in the cell.
Cellular transport. Everything that enters or leaves a cell has to pass through the cell membrane, which is an organelle that is present in all cell types. This process is carried out by a cellular transport. This transport can be of four types. One of them is active. This transport spends energy and goes against gradients of concentration. A good example is the sodium-potassium pump at phase. All eukaryotic cells have this phase. Passive. This transport doesn't waste energy and goes in favor of concentration gradient. It can be simple diffusion. The molecules cross the lipid bilayer. And facilitated diffusion. The passage molecules depend on the presence of the integral membrane proteins that allow this passage. These proteins can be channels or complex transporters. Ultrafiltration. Water and some solutes pass through a membrane due to hydrostatic pressure. The flow is always from highest to lowest pressure. Endocytosis. incorporation of material into the cell, exocytosis, secretion of material produced by the cell. Levels of organization. The components that make up living beings constitute a complex organization. The first level is the atom. The atoms form molecules and biomolecules. The biomolecules constitute the organelles and structures. The set of organelles form the cell. A cell is specialized in specific functions, form a tissue. The tissue form organs. The organs are grouped into systems. The system constitutes the individual. A population is made up of individuals of the same species. The community is formed by a set of populations. The grouping of population together with the abiotic factors constitute the ecosystem. The biosphere is the total of set of ecosystems present in the earth.
Hello, my name is Emiliano Tellez Rodriguez. I'm from the group 209 and I'm going to talk about the homeostasis. First of all, homeostasis has two Greek words. One is homoios, that means equal or similar, and stasis, that means the state or ability. Homeostasis concept was created in 1928 by Walter B. And he said that homeostasis is the regulation of internal environment in the body. Another thing is that cells take their own regulation to survive. Our body do multiple things related with homeostasis, even if they consume energy. One example of this thing can be this one, that if a person is freezing, he or she shake so he or she can get warmer. This is a common example in all humans because we do that thing when the temperature is cold. This is called thermal homeostasis. All the homeostasis is achieved by the metabolism, that it can be catabolism or anabolism, and the self-regulation ability that all living things have. This means that all living things can do homeostasis, like this example and other examples, like the glucose example. And this means that when we have high or low level of glucose, it passes through the pancreas, and then our glucose levels in the blood are going to stabilize, so we can have a normal level of glucose. Now I'm going to talk about the organ systems. First of all, we have the cardiovascular system. It transports oxygen, nutrients, and other substances to the cell. The second one is the lymphatic. It defends the body against infections. Then is the digestive, that processes food and absorbs nutrients. The endocrine has the purpose of communication within of the body through hormones. The integumentary provides protection against injuries and loss of fluids. This can be an example when you are losing blood. The integumentary is in charge of that. The muscular provides movement, support, and heat production. The nervous collect, transfers, and processes information. The reproductive produces gametes and sexual hormones. The reproduction systems all the living things have, a lot of these systems living things share it. Then is the respiratory, that delivers air to places where gaseous exchanges occurs. The skeletal supports and protects the soft tissues of the body. The urinary eliminates excess of water, salts, and waste products of blood and body. And last one, the immune defense against microbiological pathogens and other diseases. Well, thanks for your attention.
Well, everything in our body is perfectly balanced by a mechanism that allows us to maintain homeostasis, therefore our health. And the disease is the lack or absence of that homeostasis. Our health is affected by four things: environment, genetics, lifestyle, and public health. Genetics and environment affects us at 20%. Our public health affects us 10%, and our lifestyles affect like the 50% of it. So I'm going to talk about lifestyle. If we don't do exercise or eat healthy, we could develop obesity, cardiovascular diseases, and some types of cancer. So we need to do exercise and eat. And another thing that can affect our health are the emotional, social, and our environment. It's emotional, physical, y mental. Every adolescent sees himself in the middle of many changes that affect him in significant ways. These changes are physical, psychological, and social. Physical changes closely associated with the puberty and the hormones. They start to the secretion of testosterone and androstenedione. While in women, the second causes is menstruation. The adrenal gland begins to secrete high levels of androgens, which influence the growth of pubic, armpit, and facial hair, as well as the physical growth and increase the amount of fat in skin caused by the other. The ants to demonstration of the sexual organs, such as the growth of female genitalia, the development of the breast in women, and in men the growth of the genitals and increase muscle mass. Okay, there are 7 things that can help us in our lifestyle. That is sleep between 7 and 8 hours a day, have breakfast every day, perform 3 meals a day, maintain our body weight in acceptable limits, practice a physical activity regular, and do not consume or moderate the consumption of alcohol, do not smoke, and finally, a healthy lifestyle leads to a healthy life, and an unhealthy lifestyle leads to disease. That's it.